It's a new day dawning, the time is at hand, where the glory of the Lord will be revealed to every man. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in. Open the door, open the door, open the door, and let the King of Glory in.
All right. Let the King of Glory in. Open up the door. Starts right now. So fling wide, you heavenly gates, and prepare the way of the risen Lord. The Apostle John, he was on the island of Patmos. He was imprisoned for the testimony of Jesus Christ, and he heard a sound behind him, and he said, behold, I looked. There was a door standing open in heaven, and I heard a voice which was like a trumpet speaking with me, saying, come up here, and I will show you the things which must take place. That's what we need, my friends. We need a heavenly perspective of the things that are going on in the world around us, the things that the Word of God foretold us would come to pass, those things which must take place, and those things which are taking place even now. That is what this show is all about, discussing the issues of the day, discerning the times in which we live from a biblical perspective and worldview. Good afternoon, everybody. Andy White here, and welcome to this week's edition of Open Up the Doors. It is the fusion of heart, mind, and soul. And hey, do me a favor if you're tuned in. Join us over at the Open Up the Doors Facebook page, where I am streaming live. You can find my Facebook page at facebook.com/FaithFM 91.7. And if you do join us there on Facebook Live, please share the page, get it out into the stream, let people know about Open Up the Doors, invite people to come in and tune in and listen in. It's the way we can increase the listening audience here at Faith FM in general, Open Up the Doors in particularly right now as I'm speaking from beautiful Sag Harbor out on the east end of Long Island. I am looking to have as much of an interactive experience with my listening audience as possible. So please join us on Facebook Live. Shoot off some comments. Join the conversation. Also, if you would like to email me privately about anything I share on the show, or you'd like to, expand the dialogue, so to speak, you can email me at ajwhite777@icloud.com. That's ajwhite777 at icloud.com. All right, let's get into it. You know, I was looking at I've been just looking over the scriptures there in Romans. You know, Paul wrote the letter to the Romans over 2,000 years ago, as of course we know. And as I look at some of the things he says there in Romans, I have to shake my head sometimes to say, wow, that was 2,000 years ago. It seems like the human condition, the human spiritual condition has not improved by one iota in 2,000 years. In fact, it actually could be argued that it's gotten worse. I mean, Paul writes in Romans chapter 1, he says here in verse 28, let me pull it up here. He says, and even though they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, sexual immorality, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, evil-mindedness. They are whisperers, backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things. Yeah. I could do a whole show probably on that one. Inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, undiscerning, that's the day we're in, untrustworthy, unloving, unforgiving, unmerciful, who knowing the righteous judgment of God that those who practice such things are deserving of death. Here's a kicker. Not only do they do the same, but they approve of those who practice them. And we are living in a day and age where people don't believe in sin anymore. Sin has become, all kinds of other euphemistic type of terms like a disease, or people who just claim that they were born a certain way. And the world is not only turned its back against the idea of sin, if I could word it that way, but they approve of those who practice them. And as I look at this litany here in Romans 1:29, these people, mankind, filled with unrighteousness and covetousness and wickedness, I have to look at this list and I say, man, like I said a moment ago, the human condition has not by any means improved one iota. Oh, yes, we've grown in knowledge and technology, but the human condition, our soul, and our relationship with God, it's exactly what it was 2,000 years ago. And again, I would argue that maybe it's even gotten a bit worse. And I'm saying all that for this reason, because something happened yesterday that I think is so indicative and emblematic of what is really the spiritual condition of America. And as I was, getting my thoughts together just yesterday about what to share on the show, and I really was going in several different directions since we're coming into the 4th of July weekend and stuff, and I wanted to do a kind of a 4th of July, message and different things. But I came across this article yesterday that just happened yesterday, as a matter of fact. The headline said, "Man destroys new Ten Commandments statue at Arkansas Capitol." And I investigated the story a little bit, and it turns out that in Little Rock, and this is out of the AP report, it was reported in several different news organizations, but reading out of the AP report where I first saw it, it says, "A man yelled freedom." Well, it is the 4th of July, right? A man yelled freedom as he crashed his vehicle into Arkansas's it was brand new. They just put this monument up on Tuesday, from what I ascertained by researching this out. This guy crashes his vehicle into this solid granite monument that was like 6 feet high, weighed over a ton. He just crashes his car into it and destroys the thing. And if you see the picture in the news, it's just a shattered piece of granite, just shattered into dozens, if not hundreds of pieces, just lying on the ground. And according to the article, the monument was privately funded. It wasn't like there was any taxes or state funds that put this monument up. In fact, they put it up because Arkansas, the government there, had people there who wanted to put it up. They wanted a legal case saying that it could be erected. It wasn't a quote unquote violation of the First Amendment, which I might get into a little bit later on in the show, but it was totally legit, totally good, non-taxpayer funded, privately funded, and it was placed outside the state capitol. It was in front of the state capitol, but not on Capitol grounds. And like I said, it was up for less than 24 hours. And this guy, Michael Tate Reed is his name, by the way, of Van Buren, Arkansas. He's 32 years old. They booked him, they jailed him. But apparently, this guy did the same thing a couple of years back in Oklahoma. So this guy I don't know if he just drives around the country like looking for monuments of the Ten Commandments that he could smash his car into. I mean, I don't know. It's funny because you're always hearing about, maybe I shouldn't go down that road. I'll rein it in. Anyway, this guy, Michael Tate Reed. But it gets almost more bizarre than that, because last night, after I already got my notes together, I'm going to pull this story up out of, if it comes up now. I had a story here out of Charisma. They covered this story in Charisma magazine. And anyway, he claims to be a Christian. It's not coming up. I don't know why I had it before. Anyway, this guy in Charisma magazine puts this headline up. Christian man. I don't even know why they would title it this way, but this was the title in Charisma magazine. Christian man decimates monument of 10 commandments. Because apparently this guy, Michael Tate, he claims to be a Christian. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me read this out of Charisma. It took a while for it to load into the laptop here. But a Christian man, according to Charisma News, and I have issues with the headline that they chose here. Why did they put it, man claiming to be Christian decimates 10 Commandments statue? I mean, they're just going with what this guy says. A Christian man decimated the 10 Commandments monument in Arkansas less than 24 hours after its installation at the state capitol. Again, police arrested Michael Tate Reed. Reed professes, here's the part I wanted to get to in this particular article. Reed professes to be a Christian on his social media profile. Okay, well, this is the day where everybody can identify as whatever they want to. I mean, if I want to identify as I guess as an Aborigine from Australia, I'm allowed to do that now, because we are living in the age where you're allowed to identify as anything that you claim. And if you claim it, if you claim to be, we know what this is all about now. If you claim to be a female when you're a man, that's okay. If you claim to be black, if you're white, that's okay, because, you can create your own reality. So this guy, Reed, professes to be a Christian. So I guess he's allowed to self-identify as a Christian based on what he is saying. And here's the quote in Charisma Magazine from this guy, Tate Reed, or Reed Tate, whatever his name is. He says here, quote, "I'm a firm believer that part of salvation is that we not only have faith in Jesus Christ, but we obey the commandments of God, and that we confess Jesus as Lord." End quote. He says that part of salvation, actually it's the whole of it, so I won't dissect every word here, but that's actually the whole thing. But he says a part of salvation is we obey the commandments of God and confess Jesus Lord. Okay, I'll give you that. That's a true enough statement in of itself. Then he goes on to say, but one thing I do not support, this is where it gets really funny and convoluted, but one thing I do not support is the violation of our constitutional right to have the freedom that's guaranteed to us, that guarantees the separation of church and state, because no one religion should the government represent. Now, I'm not exactly sure where he got that from, because it's not in the Constitution, as most of us who have really looked at this issue understand. Separation of church and state is not in the Constitution. It's a misappropriation of something that Thomas Jefferson said in the letter to the Danbury Baptist that the left has taken out of context since about the 1940s. I won't go down that bunny trail right now, but as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, okay, so you say you're a believer in Jesus Christ. You're claiming to be a Christian, but you're going to put your faulty interpretation of the Constitution ahead of your Christian convictions, ahead of respect for other people's property. I mean, we can go down a lot of avenues with this, actually. The article goes on with a lot of other stuff about him and his Facebook page and whatnot. But I just find this somewhat intriguing to some degree, that this guy, Michael Tate, turns around and claims to be a Christian after demolishing the Ten Commandments. And you know what? Whatever he is or isn't, and that all aside, because whatever he is or isn't, it nevertheless is emblematic and symptomatic of the pandemic that it is in our society. As I was looking at the picture of the Ten Commandments shattered in hundreds of pieces, I felt that was a prophetic picture. That's how it struck me. It was a prophetic picture of the United States of America, holding to a form of godliness but denying the power thereof, saying they're Christians, claiming to be a Christian nation, but we know that the godless God-haters have taken over in the realms of our government. And that is why, by the way, I opened up with that list in Romans, because one of the things Paul talks about is, he specifically says, they are God-haters. God-haters, atheists. Again, this guy doesn't claim to be atheist, he claims to be Christian. I find that claim to be rather dubious based upon his actions. But that aside, there are those who have taken up who have really pushed their agenda and have made so much inroads into our government structures that guys like this Michael Tate have bought into it, even over and above whatever he claims to be as a Christian. These God-haters wanting freedom from religion. There's even an organization by that name called Freedom from Religion. Freedom from religion, really? Freedom from anything that speaks of God. Freedom? Because a lot of these people claim to be, folks that want to embrace freedom. No, they're not. They're liars. They hate God. It's not freedom they want. They want to put people into the bondage that they're in, because it's not freedom. And I'm going to speak in the general. Again, I'm not speaking anymore about this guy Michael Tate, because I don't know him. But I'm going to use this situation really to speak to the imagery, I should say. Because these haters of God, that's what they are. They are haters of God, as Paul says. They're unrighteous haters of God. And they're wrapped. You are wrapped. If you are an atheist listening to this broadcast right now for whatever reason, maybe you want to poke fun at me, maybe you want to scream, maybe whatever. But I'm going to tell you the truth in love. You haters of God, you atheists, you are wrapped in chains of irrational hatred. You claim that you claim rights and you claim separation of church, but you're really living in irrational hatred. You fight against and you fly into fits of rage against someone you insist doesn't even exist. I have yet to ever try and figure that out, how these people can fly into a fit of rage, how they can be so angry over something that they say doesn't even exist. I mean, that is beyond the pale of reason. And yet you claim to be the rational ones. It is your atheism, my friend, that is irrational. You mock those of us who believe in an eternal God who created the universe by the fiat of his word. You mock us. Yet, you'll either hold to the pagan belief that the universe itself is eternal, or that everything that exists came into being out of nothing without any causation whatsoever put upon the nothing. I mean, that atheist position to me is quite untenable. As King David so succinctly said in the book of Psalms, the fool has said in his heart, there is no God. The irony of the freedom from religion people is that atheism itself really is the epitome of religion. It relies on blind faith in the most literal sense of the term, because they make themselves willfully blind to the creation that's there. Because in Romans, the part I didn't read talks about how the eternal power of the Godhead can be manifestly seen in what was created, but they suppress the truth in unrighteousness. And there's such an irony in this. The atheist religion, and that's what it is. Atheism is religion. They like to tout freedom from religion, but they are bound in the chains of the most blind of all religions. The atheist religion is contradictory to all that we can see and know. And yet, despite the claims of the atheist that they do not have a religion, as I said, it is the epitome of a religious belief system. Because after all, religion itself can be summed up very simply by what a person believes about existence. Christians believe in a creator that brought about existence. Yes, there was nothing. But what caused the something out of the nothing was when God spoke, let there be. He created the heavens and the earth by the power of his word. Some scientists believe in the quote-unquote Big Bang theory. So some scientists understand that and this is most of where the science is today, by the way, really. Most scientists today really do believe, because they can clock it, they can date it, they can see the evidence that there was a definite beginning to the universe. There was a definite beginning. Well, that's totally biblical. And I don't have I got a lot of problems with a lot of the presuppositions of modern science, but I don't have a problem with the quote-unquote Big Bang theory as it stands in and of itself. Because when God spoke, let there be light. When God spoke into the darkness, when God spoke into the nothingness and created, you better believe there was a bang, baby. It was boom, and creation came. And then God ordered the creation. But I'm digressing somewhat. But you see, the point is that as Christians, we believe in causation, because we can see all around us that there is a cause and effect. That is part of real science, a cause and effect. And yet, atheists who claim to believe in science will say that the Big Bang just happened with no cause. Matter which didn't exist came into existence and just exploded. Atheists, as I said, it's a belief system that takes as much faith or more faith than anything else. They believe that natural forces brought about existence. But where did the natural forces come from? As evolutionist Carl Sagan once famously said, mocking Christians and mocking the Bible, Carl Sagan once said, in the beginning there was hydrogen. Okay, Mr. Sagan, can you explain to me where the hydrogen came from? Where did the hydrogen come from? So hydrogen is your God. You mock those of us who claim in an eternal God, and yet you believe in a gas that was eternal. In the beginning was hydrogen. No, in the beginning was God who made the hydrogen. Because Carl Sagan, of course, never goes on to explain where the hydrogen came from. And the fact is that both theism and atheism are belief systems, and both belief systems require faith. There's an old adage that goes, if there is a watch, then there must be a watchmaker. If there is order and design, there must be a designer. That's just common sense. Complexity and harmony does not come out of chaos, which is what the evolutionists and the atheists believe. That complexity and order came out of chaos, which goes against the second law of thermodynamics. Again, I can't get into that right now. That all aside for the moment. Why? Really, when you start getting down to the nitty-gritty, why do these people hate God? It's not about science. It's not about seeking to know the mysteries of the universe, really. These types of people, these freedom from religion people, these people who go apoplectic over anything spiritual or religious in society, and particularly the Christian Judeo God, mind you, by the way. I'm still waiting for the day where I see some leftist or God-hater, walk into a Muslim bake shop and order, a cake for their wedding. I'm still waiting to see the day when some, crescent, star and crescent gets turned over like the Ten Commandments. I'm waiting for that day. Not because I want people to actually do it, because I'm pointing out the hypocrisy of the godless, and particularly the leftists, when it comes to this issue. Why do these people hate God so much? I've been pondering that for a couple of days. Why does Paul say in the last days men will be God-haters? Well, obviously, I can't speak specifically about what goes on in the minds of people. I think people might hate God and be angry for God for all kinds of obvious personal reasons. But I think, generally speaking, it can be summed up by what Jesus said himself, that this is the condemnation, that the light has come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light. The light does not, hates the light and does not come to the light, that lest his deeds should be exposed. They hate God because the idea of God means that they can't live the life that they want to selfishly live, which is what all sin is. They want to be their own God, which is what caused Satan to fall from heaven. It's the same sin. It's the same issue. And as I said a moment ago, the picture of the monument of the Ten Commandments thrown to the ground and broken, I believe, is a prophetic picture of where America is spiritually and governmentally. I realize, of course, thank God, that there is a holy and believing remnant. There is a holy remnant in America. God always reserves himself 7,000 that will not bow the knee to Baal. But the sad reality is that the greater masses of the people are godless or God-hating. And the abominations of the godless are codified into federal laws and statutes. The shedding of innocent blood through abortion has been codified by federal fiat. The unholy and unnatural union, euphemistically called gay marriage, has been codified by federal fiat. The laws of nature and of nature's God are daily being cast aside and trampled underfoot by an overreaching and godless government. The haters of God are attempting to, and succeeding at least, in the realm of public policy to dismantle every basic foundational building block of God's creation. That's what that picture of the Ten Commandments, smashed into off its foundation, off of its base, that's what that represented to me in the spirit. The dismantling of every basic foundational building block of God's creation. It is the rebellious attack against God himself. Everything that God instituted in the garden that was natural, marriage, is under attack. Gender is being redefined. Procreation, production. I'm going to get into these things when I come back from the break. About a month ago, Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, at a commencement speech, talked about having a universal basic income. You might say, what does that got to do with any of this? I'll show you when I come back. Because these are all doctrines of demons. And Satan has systematically, in these last days, implemented his agenda. We'll get into that more when I come back. Stick around. Newsboys live with abandon. Welcome back. Andy White here. You are listening to Open Up the Doors here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in Napeague, WEGQ 91.7 in Quag. And I want to live with abandon. Yes, I do. Living for Jesus, standing up, being the salt of the earth that Jesus called us to be. You know, Jesus said you are the salt of the earth. And salt doesn't stop corruption, but it impedes it. We know that this world is passing away, and we know that God's kingdom is coming. And we know that in the last days that times are going to wax worse and worse. But we are to be that salt impeding the corruption. We ought to be that light that pierces the darkness against the satanic agenda. And that's what I want to talk to you for a few minutes right now about the satanic agenda, the doctrines of demons. We hear a lot today about doctrines of demons. And a friend of mine I believe he lives in Kansas, is preaching a series on doctrines of demons. But I was thinking about this the other day, and you know, the doctrines of demons began in the garden. That's where they began. They didn't develop over time. The doctrines of demons began in the garden when God said to Eve, "Has God said?" And then the serpent began to give Eve a tutorial on why God was holding out on her. That was the first doctrine of demon. To question God and to think that God was holding something of value back from us was the initial beginning of the doctrines of demons. But let's advance the story to our generation. Because has anyone noticed how calculated and systematic this has all been? When you look at what is commonly referred to as the culture war, when you look at what's going on in our society, has it dawned on you at all how calculated it's been? 2 years ago this month, after they redefined the definition of marriage in the United States Supreme Court by judicial fiat, as I shared at the top of the show, the floodgates have been opened up to redefine both gender and biology, amongst other things. You see, the slippery slope, my friends, is turning into a cliff, falling, and it's all falling into the abyss. But the godless and the God haters began the attack on marriage back in the 1960s and 70s, for those of us who are old enough to remember, back in the 60s and 70s. And I have found it quite ironic that the same people that were rebelling against marriage back in the 70s, claiming it was nothing more than a piece of paper. Oh, you know, we don't need marriage. Let's throw the institution of marriage away. Because remember, it was God who instituted the institution of marriage. It is God who defined marriage. In the 60s and 70s, people were, you know, the God haters, the leftists, the liberals, They wanted to throw the institution out the window because, after all, it was nothing more than a piece of paper. Those same people, those very people, are the same people today who are screaming and fighting for gay marriage rights. So what happened? All of a sudden it's important again. Oh, but they've redefined it. That's the issue. It's the same godless spirit working to undermine and destroy what God himself instituted. Just like that monument was just crumbled in that picture. The undermining of the foundations. Because marriage was instituted to be a picture of the image of God himself. God ordained marriage. God ordained marriage because it's both a picture of the unity and the oneness of the Godhead. The Trinity. 3 persons in one God. In marriage, 2 persons become one flesh. 2 distinct persons, but one flesh. three distinct persons but one God. Marriage was meant to be a reflection of the nature of God. Marriage was meant to be a reflection of the unity and the love which indwells the Godhead itself. Marriage was meant to be a picture of Christ and his church, which is why Satan has come against marriage from the very beginning almost, but particularly in this generation, because I want to focus on these last days. So when the godless want to undermine and corrupt marriage, really, it's not about marriage. It's the nature and image of God that is the target of their hatred. What God instituted in the garden, they want to delegitimize or redefine. If they can't delegitimize it, because they tried delegitimizing it in the 60s and 70s, let's redefine it. But now it's progressed to even the denial of gender. Again, foundational truths. In the beginning, God made them male and female. But now we've redefined marriage. Now we can redefine gender, which of course is pure fantasy. Redefining gender, it's pure fantasy. Actually, you know what? I take it back, because calling it pure fantasy, that's too gracious. It's delusional. It's the delusional influence of doctrines of demons. But the descent into the abyss, that slippery slope that people talk about, has progressed even further. Because now that we've redefined marriage 2 years ago by fiat the Supreme Court, now we can redefine gender, because now they're telling us that there's more than two genders. In fact, New York City put out a pamphlet, I think it was 2 years ago or a year ago, where they have like 37 different genders. I mean, it's really, really absolutely moral insanity. But now it's the descent, as I said, the descent into the abyss gets even more bizarre, because now we're talking about procreation. God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply, and he designed their bodies to do that very thing. And yet, we have a government now instituting through the military. I got to read you this headline here. It says that there was this headline I came across that Army's transgender policy includes guidelines on male pregnancies. No, I didn't misread that, folks. That was a story. That was an article. The Army's transgender policy, which it's saying the Army, but really it's really from the Department of Defense at the Pentagon, put out a guideline for all of the military services. This particular article focused on the Army's, but inside the Army's quote policy on the military service of transgender soldiers training manual, I picked out some things it was talking about in that article. The training manual put out by the Department of Defense for the Army. The training module specifically outlines key roles and responsibilities of commanders, transgender soldiers, military medical providers, and administrative management organizations. This training manual is mandatory for all uniformed members, as well as the Department of the Army civilians. Now, this training manual, these briefing materials, according to the article, covers all sorts of scenarios that those in military service who might be transgender are to face with the regular gendered people, normal people. The briefing materials cover things like shower stall etiquette to trans female soldiers deployed in countries that would not be so open to LGBT countries. In other words, they need to train them on how to conduct themselves in these other countries. Female soldiers, this is in the Army's manual. Female soldiers must come to terms with taking a shower alongside men who identify as women. Yeah, this is going to go real well. You can just see this really going well. Even if the transgender soldier did not undergo sex reassignment surgery. This reminds me of something that was almost funny. I read an article. I'm going to go down this bunny trail for a moment, but this was kind of funny in a crazy sort of way. But I read a story a couple of months back about this homosexual guy. Okay, he was homosexual, obviously, so he meant he was attracted to same sex. He was a guy, but he transgendered into a woman. So this gay guy transgendered into a woman, then claimed that he was lesbian. Yeah, you try and figure that one out. A gay guy who said he was attracted to men, transgenders into a woman, now says he's still gay and he's attracted to women. What? It's just insane. It's pure insanity. And they're bringing this kind of stuff into our armed forces. Quoting from this Army's training manual for transgenders, quote, soldiers must accept living, they must accept it, they don't have a choice. Soldiers must accept living and working conditions that are often austere, primitive, and characterized by little or no privacy, the module states. All soldiers will use billeting, bathroom, and shower facilities associated with their gender marker. In other words, whatever they're identifying as, they will use that shower facility. The Army guidelines mandate that facilities will not be designed, modified, or constructed to make transgender-only areas, which would be the most logical answer, of course, if you're going to deal with this insanity. The training manuals proclaim there will be mixed genitalia in military showers and sleeping quarters. Now, here's where it gets really, really super crazy. I said that to set this all up, because I already showed you how the doctrines of demons and how the God haters are there's a real method to their madness. They've undermined marriage. They've undermined gender. Now they're undermining, well, they think they are anyway. I mean, obviously you can't really do that except in your delusionary world. But now this Army manual talks about what to do. That's a quote. What to do when commanders are encountered with an expectant transgender male soldier. Yes, an expectant male soldier. The soldier did not have sex reassignment surgery. This happened. The soldier did not have sex reassignment surgery and recently stopped taking male hormones in order to try and start a family. So this woman, who said she was really a guy, decides that she wants to stop taking her hormones to become a guy because now her natural womanhood is kicking in and she wants to have children, but she's still identifying as a man. So the Army has to treat her. Here is the Army manual's response. Transgender soldiers with a medical condition, including pregnancy, will be treated the same as any other soldier with that condition. I'm not even sure how to interpret that statement in this bizarro world which we're living in. Does that mean the transgender male will now be treated as a woman who is pregnant? Because after all, it is a woman who is pregnant. But if you treat a transgender male the same as you would treat a woman who is pregnant, wouldn't that be considered bigotry and discrimination? I mean, my friends, this is moral insanity. This normalizing of male pregnancies, this normalizing of gender identification it's science fiction, as though it's some kind of a biological reality. This isn't tolerance. It's a suspension of reason. It's mindless intellectual dishonesty parading as enlightenment. It's the politics of fools and the social engineering of lunatics. And as the scripture states, professing themselves to be wise, they become fools. Again, the natural laws of God being undermined through government fiat in our society. That is what, when I saw the Ten Commandments destroyed, these are the thoughts that went through my mind, because this is the spiritual condition of our country. Productivity. God told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply. And it's more than just about making babies. It's about tending the garden. God set the man and the woman in the garden and said, tend the garden. Being a responsible and productive human being. We work because God works. If you don't work, the Bible says you don't eat. But now the godless are saying, no, there's no need to work or be productive if you don't want to. Society will take care of you. Mark Zuckerberg has recently come out calling for universal basic income. I'll get into that a little bit when I come back. I need to take a break. The fusion of Heart, Mind, and Soul. This is Open Up the Doors with Danny White here on Faith FM, WEGB 90.7 and 93.3 in FP, and WEGQ 91.7 in Quad. Thanks for hanging out with me here on this beautiful, beautiful late June Thursday afternoon, coming up into the 4th of July weekend as well. And I hope it's going to be a good one for everybody. Only got a couple of minutes left. This show went really fast. I got more stuff here I wanted to get into, but one of the things I was pontificating about earlier in the last block was how there has been this systematic, this very coordinated effort by the God haters, and of course it's powers and principalities. Of course it's the agenda of Satan to undermine everything that is God, the image of God. They want to mar the image of God. They want to, they want to destroy who and what God is, what He has set up. That's what it's all about. It's about the satanic hatred of God, and dismantling the very nature of things. That's what this is all about. And what was interesting to me, I talked about marriage. I talked about gender. Redefinition of gender. I talked about the silliness of male pregnancy. It's just insanity. But the other day, something that caught my attention the other day was that Mark Zuckerberg is out there promoting this idea for a universal basic income. And it's an idea that is starting to gain ground in quote-unquote leftist circles. Should everyone in America receive a basic income directly from the federal government? I mean, considering that we are already $20 trillion in debt, that concept would sound quite foolish on the face of it. But it is an idea that's really starting to gain traction. Zuckerberg said at a commencement speech that he spoke of, I think it was at Harvard. Yeah, he delivered a commencement speech at Harvard last month. Zuckerberg said, we should explore ideas like universal basic income to make sure that everyone has a cushion to try new ideas. What? Some countries are already experimenting with the idea of a basic income. See, a country that has universal basic income guarantees every person a set minimum income regardless of any criteria, regardless of their age, regardless of their wealth, their job status, their hometown, their family. It means that every single person in the nation will get a paycheck whether they have a job or not. Now, I know the selfish side of me says, yeah, all right, baby, send me the money. But no, that's ridiculous. That's totally ridiculous. That's against God's creation. God said, be fruitful and multiply. God put you in the garden to tend the garden. See, this, again, it's an attack on the nature of things. It's an attack against God's design. And you might think that this is not related to the other things. It's the same thing. And some countries like Finland, I read, are already experimenting with this idea. And I guarantee you, in the end, it will end in dismal failure. There are way too many sociological and psychological problems with this idea. And it's not in the scope of this broadcast right now, really, to get into all of that. But this is the bottom line with all of this in a lot of ways. It's plainly evident that we are living, as I've said so many times before, and I wrote an article a few months back, it is so plainly evident that we are living in an age of moral cowardice, that there is no moral clarity anymore at all. There's this incredible moral cowardice that a great many people in this country are manifesting. I've often said that ideas have consequences. And today we have a generation of leaders and politicians and educators, authority figures, and media and political pundits who, after having been brought up in a morally relativistic educational and societal climate, they are not capable of recognizing evil for what it is. Moral cowardice is the logical end result of moral relativism. It refuses to acknowledge existential evil, and it fails to understand the pathology and ideology of evil intent. And that's whether the God haters understand this or not is irrelevant, because they're nothing but tools. They are nothing but useful idiots in the hands of the devil. And when leaders are moral cowards, they become appeasers. This is one of the reasons that after 7 years of rhetorically saying that Obamacare, for instance, will be repealed, it's not getting done. Because the politicos would rather compromise and appease instead of stand in the courage of their moral convictions, if they had the moral convictions at all in the first place. It was easy to campaign on the rhetoric of repealing Obamacare because they knew it wasn't really going to get done. So you could, it's really easy to say that you're for something if you know it's impossible or it's not going to happen. But now, this is where their hypocrisy and their moral compromising has really been made evident. When after 7 years of saying they're going to repeal Obamacare, they can't do it, and this Congress is putting forth a system that's actually going to be worse, if that's even imaginable, would actually even be worse than Obamacare. There's only 4 or 5 senators who are standing on moral convictions. Mike Lee and Rand Paul and a few others who have been holding this thing back. Thank God for them. They are the salt in the corruption of the Senate, because they stopped going forth or putting forth that bad bill yesterday. And it sounds like it might be a little bit of a digression from what I was saying, but it speaks to the issue of compromising with evil. When you compromise with evil, evil will always win. And somebody says, Brother Andy, is there any hope for America? Is there any hope for America? Honestly, not any more than there is for the rest of this world. It's about the same thing, really. You know, the Bible says, Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 7, for the form of this world is passing away. And then the Apostle John wrote in his first epistle, the world is passing away, and the lust thereof. But he who does the will of God will abide forever. Is there hope for America? There's no hope for this world except in Jesus Christ. As I've shared so often, I'm looking for a city whose builder and maker is God. I used to get really, really upset about these things in Washington. I mean, my natural nationalistic sense would be to get all bent out of shape and huffy and puffy about what's going on in the Congress and the Senate with this Obamacare stuff, because it's a real travesty is the word I'm looking for. But you know what? I'm realizing that we are so near the return of Jesus Christ. I don't really care about what's going on in D.C. anymore. I'm interested on a certain level, of course, but man, my focus is on the kingdom of God. My focus is on being the light of the world that we're called to be. And is there any light? I mean, there are some rays of hope. I mean, I don't want to paint such a horrible picture, because I just read something really, really kind of cool yesterday. That's a good thing. That Governor Matt Bevin in Kentucky signs a bill allowing Kentucky's public schools to teach the Bible. So we have a ray of hope. We have a ray of light piercing the darkness of the God-haters, piercing the darkness of the secularists, and pushing back. And I looked at this, and I wanted to end the broadcast on this up note, that Kentucky is going to allow the schools to teach the Bible. They're not going to teach, quote-unquote, religious doctrine, but they're going to teach the Bible as let me read it out here. Public schools in Kentucky can soon teach reading, writing in the book of Revelation, is what the article says. That was a play on the 3 R's. Let me get to it really did set a foundation that our founding fathers used to develop documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. All those principles came from the Bible. Totally true is what this one state representative in Kentucky said. Representative D.J. Johnson said. That's true. They're going to be teaching the Bible on an academic level, not a religious level, and that is a good thing, because there is wisdom in the Bible. There is the principles of what this country was founded on in the Bible. Of course there is. So there is at least some rays of light piercing the darkness, and that is a bit of good news in the midst of all this insanity that's going on around us. Is there any hope for America? As I said once before, there is no hope in the elephant. There is no hope in the donkey. Our only hope is in the Lamb, the Lamb of God, my friends. And we're coming up into the 4th of July weekend. And I want to just tell everybody, thanks for tuning in. Have a great 4th of July, everybody. This hour went by really fast. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Have a great 4th. Walk in the freedom with which Christ has set you free. And keep it right here on Faith FM.